As someone who comments often on US UK politics, I'd like to know his messages now resonate with Brits. Why have Britons, particularly historically, been reluctant to embrace him? And have we now turned a corner?
Well, I think the point is Trump is our, if you like, we have views of good and bad Americans. Trump is the ultimate bad American. Do you remember in the Second World War, what was it that was said by jealous English and Scottish people about visiting American soldiers? Overpaid, oversexed, and over here. And Trump is the ultimate American over. Loud, brash, aggressive, noisy, big, generally gets in the way, has no manners, dear. I mean, the number of dinner tables that I've sat round when I've defended Trump, and you know, sweet friends at the country, oh, David, you've got a charming man, how could you possibly? And he's a completely, I know he's not a Yankee, but he's a complete Yank bull in a china shop. That in a country like Britain, where still, certainly in most of our discourse. I mean, we are a very strange people, as you know. We swear in the most disgusting fashion possible, and yet, on the other hand, much British discourse is extraordinarily formal and polite, almost like Japanese, which is why the Japanese are so fascinated by Britain. Why, you know, there are some very extraordinary Japanese novels about Britain. As I always point out to people, the reason the French always win negotiations with Britain, we defeat them in war, but they win in negotiation, is because the French are very good at saying non. Are very good at saying no. It's very bad mannered to say no in English. You say, well, I'm terribly sorry, but I really, you know, and you blather on for the next 5 minutes, whereas the French just say no. And that's that. And Trump exemplifies all of those things. But I think that as issues like immigration, as become so much more prominent, as again Trump hasn't yet looked at the whole Muslim question. It'd be very interesting to see how he would handle that. But Trump again, things that haven't really been picked up here. Trump has started to look at things like the disorder of streets. He has signed executive orders actually reinstating the idea of putting the mentally sick into institutions, the things that were abandoned in the 1960s. Now, if that starts to begin the great urban cleanup, as we are all the time lamenting the disintegration of our urban landscape, as we are all the time complaining about immigration, if there is that clear message from there, and an even bigger message, of course, is the one that Vance particularly embodies, which is the whole issue of freedom of speech. And I think that may be the point at which Trump, you know, with the very fact that he embodies the most extravagant form of freedom of speech, may actually start to break favourably into the British consciousness. Our profound sense that we have a government, because it represents all those dead elite opinions that Trump has rubbished in America, but we've got a government that embodies them all, knows that they're widely rejected, like the fact that multiculturalism is deeply wonderful, that immigration is a good thing, and so on. That they know these things are unpopular, but they realise the only way they can suppress resistance to them is by suppressing freedom of speech, and doing it particularly in the world that we are on now, in the world of social media, in the world of the internet, in the suppression of X, of Twitter, and so on. Now that is going, I think, to bring about a quite dramatic and deliberate clash between the as it were, both sides of the Atlantic. I mean, it's already emerging. I mean, Vance, I gather, is going to be in Britain very shortly on holiday in the Cotswolds. Certainly, he has got friends of mine are within his circle, and he's got all the contacts who will point out this to him. And I think at that moment, if Trump intervenes, which I'm certain he will, if Vance intervenes, which I'm doubly certain he will, I think that the patterns could start to shift quite considerably. Because remember, there's something very unusual about Trump. Normally, the conservative in Britain there's a very close relationship between the Republicans and the Conservative side in Britain. At the moment, it's only within Reform, and Reform itself has latterly been a little bit chary of Trump. But I think that there could be a really quite major realignment on the view of Trump on particularly this issue of freedom of speech.
David, why do you think it's fallen to Americans to champion freedom of speech, border security, and why has it fallen to Americans to lead the charge to save Western civilization while Britain's elites cower under Labour's misrule?
Well, I think it is the problem. It's law, Lee. It's law. Remember, some very interesting work has been done on this. The traditional explanation is, oh, you have the First Amendment, which protects freedom of speech. In fact, work has shown that there's absolutely no difference in the approach to freedom of speech, i.e. you limit it as much as possible on both sides of the Atlantic until the late 1950s and the early 1960s. It's only the result of a few very particular judges in your Supreme Court that entrench what is known as this absolutist view of freedom of speech into American law. And you will remember at the time of the last election, both Kamala Harris and more particularly Mike Waltz, her vice president, were campaigning to remove the protection of the First Amendment for hate speech. That America also, remember, leads the way in cancellation. If you go back to 2015 and 2020, particularly 2020, with the whole of the absurdity of George Floyd, it's then that you get Barry Weiss writing that extraordinary letter after she'd been forced to resign from the New York Times, saying it didn't matter who the editor of the New York Times was, the real editor was Twitter. And that's broken. And again, once again, we need to recognize it. It's broken by who? It's broken by Elon Musk. Elon Musk's carrying of that piece of white porcelain of the kitchen sink into the headquarters of Twitter, I think, like Trump's election, which in my view would not have happened without that. I think it's only once you actually break the left's stranglehold on Twitter that Trump's election would have been possible. And because, his own site, as apart from him, has got absolutely minimal impact. It's that that starts the process of breaking of the control of the left, which was just as strong in America, if not stronger, than it is here. I think the change has happened very, very much faster. In other words, you're talking as though there was a kind of, historic gap. I think apart from that very fortunate legal entrenching. I mean, America, I'm afraid all the horrors of race-based politics, of transgenderism and whatever, they all come from France via America. The silly ideas, as you know, the Starkey principle, all bad ideas are French. They all start in America, in France, and then they're reflected and amplified through American academe, through the hideous nature of your post-slavery racial politics and whatever. But we unfortunately got them late, and we got them in a fashion that was embedded, unfortunately, by the legislation of the Blair government. So whereas you were saved by law, we've been trapped by law. But I think there's an increasingly profound sense of resentment on this side of the Atlantic. I mean, we are aware that we are your ancestral state. We are aware that the liberties and the freedoms and the prosperity that you enjoy have their foundations here. We are aware that we are, by the forces that Trump appears to have defeated, being robbed of our birthright, and we're jealous of the fact. So I think, again, I would argue that we may well be, rather rather that the whole Anglo-American relationship has essentially since Suez has been a kind of performative act in foreign relations,
Mm.
save under Reagan and Thatcher. I think it could now be going to something like the closeness of Reagan and Thatcher, but as it were, the two sides in clashing with each other rather than cooperating with each other. But America, I mean, if you like, not for the first time, bringing in the old world to redress, bringing in, sorry, the new world to redress the balance of the old. I mean, after all, America saved Europe in the Second World War, and arguably to a significant extent in the First World War again. It may do so on this issue of proper freedom and democracy. Because what Europe has done, I mean, that's the great speech that Vance gave in Munich. Europe has perverted these terms. And democracy doesn't mean democracy anymore. It means protecting minority rights at the expense of the majority. And this is what's so, it means the sacrifice of the national interest in favor of some notion of global well-being. Whereas again, Trump, with this bold as brass MAGA, make America great, America first, the proper determination to protect your own people first and everything else second. And we need reminding of it. And it may be, as I said, that and by the way, that phrase first comes up in the early 19th century, when actually it's a British Foreign Secretary saying it, sorting out the mess of the Spanish Empire to limit the power of Spain in Europe, but now having a very, very different meaning with both world wars, and perhaps America intervening decisively through its power over the internet in the modern culture war. Who knows?
Well, as someone who is often crediting Britain, because there aren't a lot of people over here doing that, with our own, America's own ascendance to greatness through your legal system and the spirit of your laws, it's terribly disappointing and deflating to see
It's
Britain
tragic. It's
retreat,
tragic.
to see our mother country, the fount of our freedoms, retreat from these things. And that's why I'm hoping that Trump, it will be a shot across the bow and really resound. And on that note, David, with Britain facing economic stagnation and security lapses, should it follow Trump's results versus blueprint?
Well, I think eventually, if we're to rescue ourselves, we will have to do something like it. But remember, it's not going to happen under this current government. That completely the opposite. This is a government. What we have now in Britain is precisely the opposite of Trump. It is the absolute mirror image of Trump. You've got a man who views the system with contempt, is prepared to break it, views expert opinion, as it frequently is, as mere groupthink. Here, on the other hand, Keir Starmer is the absolute quintessence of all of those things, a rule-bound lawyer. The Labour Party is the party of what we call the blob. That's to say, the quangocrats, the securocrats, the leading figures in academic life, the mainstream media, and the legal profession. And the Labour Party, what we have now is the government, to parody Lincoln. It's the government of the blob, by the blob, for the blob. What I'm hoping is we will, as you suggest, learn the lessons of Trump. That will mean that an incoming, we hope desperately, government of the right and for the right and to do the right will learn some of the lessons of Trump. Will learn the two things, which is on the one hand, public boldness and courage, but is also, that's Trump's own contribution, but it's also having people, as I was saying before, that have done the hard work, that have done the serious preparation. It's having figures commanding the market, like Besant, like your Secretary of the Treasury. Somebody is if you compare and contrast him with our Chancellor of the Exchequer, it is shame-making.
Rachel Reed.
It is Rachel Reeves. It is simply shame-making.
Dear, oh dear.
Here but I'm afraid that is the caliber